All right, everybody, we are live. I am coming to you from Armenia, and I've got with me Hillel Fuld. You're East Coast of America, someplace, aren't you?
I am in the Holy Land, my friend.
Oh, you are. You're in the land. Great. I just left there. So I wanted to have you on because I did an entire podcast about your predictions from Facebook the other day, and so I thought I'll just reach out to him and thank you for coming on with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's an honor.
For people who are not familiar with you and your work, would you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm born and raised in New York. I moved to Israel with my family 30 years ago. And for the past 15 or so years, I've been working in the Israeli tech ecosystem, which has become famous because Israel is this tiny little country leading the world in innovation. I built a consulting business, and I was a kid in a candy store. And then, unfortunately, 7.5 years ago, my older brother, Ari Fuld, was murdered in a terrorist attack. And that kind of pulled me into the conflict. So I was a little bit more vocal about the conflict, but I was still a tech guy. But then on October 7th, I kind of threw away that mask and shut down my business, focused all my resources and my time on fighting for Israel online and leveraging, my network, which is both large but also unique in that my audience, I would say, is predominantly anti-Israel, but they trust me because I built that trust over many years. And so, more civil discussion and conversation than other people might be fortunate enough to have. And that's what I've been doing since October 7th. And my work on social has reached now 4 billion impressions, a number that blows my mind. And that's basically what I'm doing. And I'm watching, as things unfold before our eyes, both in Israel, around the world, and as it pertains to diaspora Jewry. And I'm worried, very, very worried.
Oh, for sure. There's lots to be worried about. And you successfully, or I guess, I don't know if you planned it that way, but you predicted October 7th would happen about 2 days before it happened, from what I understand. What led you to believe that there was an attack imminent on Israel back then?
Well, I wouldn't say I predicted October 7th, but I definitely took a look at the geopolitics that was happening between America and Iran, America and China, Russia and Ukraine, internal politics, and, just crazy division, both in the United States and in Israel. And I wrote, if you're paying attention and you don't think something big is about to happen, you're not paying attention. And I wrote in the post, Israel will be at the center of it. And I didn't, obviously know what was coming, but I felt something big was coming. And sure enough, it did come. And, I don't, it's not something I do regularly, make it a habit of predicting things, but
you're not a prophet.
Right, exactly. But I did feel that in my bones. And the next time I felt anything in my bones that way was recently, looking at the anti-Semitism, the events unfold around the world. And I wrote last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, that I wrote, I hope I'm wrong. And I really do hope and pray that I'm wrong. But, just looking at the data and looking at the trajectory and looking at the direction that we're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism, it seems to me that we can expect to see, unfortunately, and again, I hope I'm wrong, a large-scale mass casualty terror attack against Jews in a Jewish center somewhere in the United States or maybe in Europe. And again, I said, I hope I'm wrong, but if you look at what's going on right now, I have a great aunt who's a survivor of the Holocaust. She went through 3 death camps. And when I interviewed her, I asked her, comparing what you see today around the world to what you experienced pre-Holocaust, how do you compare them? And she said 2 words. She said the same. We're seeing Jews being harassed and assaulted. We're seeing synagogues being vandalized and firebombed. We're seeing Jews being lit alive, literally on the streets of the United States of America. And we're seeing it become institutionalized as people walk around the streets of New York, of Sydney, of every major city in the West, waving terrorist flags, and the authorities do absolutely nothing. It's just wild to see. And then we have, of course, the diplomats, the politicians, the parliaments around the world rewarding this anti-Semitism by giving the architects of the worst massacre on the Jewish people since the Holocaust a state, literally rewarding their atrocities. It's hard to believe this is happening, but we're watching it unfold. And unfortunately, I'm getting an answer to a question I had my entire life, which is, why didn't the German Jews leave? I mean, didn't they see the writing on the wall? And I didn't know an answer to that question my whole life. And now I do, because I'm speaking to my friends around the world. They're seeing what's happening and they're staying put and saying, it doesn't affect me. I'm going to stay here. And I say to them, I don't understand. If you had a gun to your head, would you not get on a plane? Yeah, of course I would. But what constitutes a gun if what's happening now doesn't constitute a gun? It's crazy to see, but that's where we're at.
It really is. I mean, every single day now we're seeing more anti-Semitic attacks. Just in the United States are up over 800% from the last article I read. And 70% of the hate crimes that take place in the United States take place against Jews. And just a tiny fraction of our population. And Jews are not, by and large, aggressive, hateful people. What do you think it is that makes the world so just rabid about Jews? I mean, you could try to make the case, some people try to make the case that it's because of the reaction to 10/7, that what's happening in Gaza, but it's way deeper than that. Because it didn't start on the 22nd of October when you guys went into Gaza. It started thousands of years ago, and it's been going on you can see it throughout history. Why is it that Jews just seem to be this target all the time for so much opprobrium?
It's a great question. Before I answer, I just want to correct something you said in the beginning, which is that the Jews are not aggressive people. I'm going to take that one step further. The Jews have done nothing in the world besides bring light, okay? And that means whether it's Nobel Prizes, whether it's leading the world in cancer research, leading the world in medical technology, leading the world in technology. I mean, people don't realize this. When you unlock your iPhone, that's Israeli technology. When you use Android, when you use Google, and you use Microsoft Teams, Riverside, we're on Riverside right now. This is an Israeli company. People don't realize this. So it's kind of ironic to see these just crazy anti-Semites, boycotting Israel and doing it from a Wix site, which is an Israeli company. But that's so. I'm not even going to say that Jews haven't been aggressive. Jews have been nothing but good to the world. So that's first of all. Second of all, as far as why they hate us. I guess there are two ways to answer that question. Theologically, according to Jewish scripture, there is a well-known quote that no matter what, anti-Semitism will always be. It's built into the DNA of the universe. They've always hated us, and they will always hate us, which I believe is true. But I'm also a logical person, and that doesn't satisfy me. So that's a question that I think most people have asked themselves their entire life. Why do they hate us? And I have, I can say one thing. That any of those people who are trying to quote unquote give excuses, oh, it's because you have a state. Really? Because they didn't hit us before we had a state? Oh, because you're so successful. Oh, really? They didn't hit us when we weren't successful? Oh, because you're white colonized. Oh, really? They didn't hit us before we were white colonizers. We weren't white enough in the Holocaust. The reasons evolve, and there's no one excuse. And anybody who thinks that the anti-Semitism we're seeing today is because of the state of Israel, they're getting it wrong. The state of Israel exists because of the anti-Semitism. Let's not forget when the state of Israel was established, it was after 6 million Jews were butchered, just unprovoked and for no reason other than Jew hatred. So let's just not forget history. That being said, I can tell you my theory. I'm sure many of your viewers are not going to love it, but I firmly believe this, and that is if you look throughout history, you look at the script, it keeps repeating itself. And here's the script. There's an empire, okay? That empire can be ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, Soviet, Nazi, and on every single empire, Babylonian, Assyrian, it doesn't matter. And this empire begins to grow. And then it grows to a level of world dominance and unparalleled power and influence. The first thing that empire does over and over and over again is it throws morality out the window. It puts people to fight to the death in the Colosseum for the emperor's entertainment. And it just forgets all about morality. Now, when it forgets about morality, it says, I don't want morality shoved down my throat. So let's find out what the source of morality was. Well, how does the world know that it's immoral to murder? Because in ancient times, it wasn't immoral to murder. It wasn't even immoral to rape. So how does the world know that? And the answer is the Bible, right? This isn't a supremacist statement. This is a factual statement. The way the world knows that it is immoral to murder is from the Bible. So the Bible brought morality to the world. Now, these empires, when they want to go after morality, they can't go after the creator of the Bible, right? So they come after the messenger, right? You go after FedEx, you don't get your package. And they come after the Jews and they say, listen, we don't want your thou shall not murder garbage. We don't want your thou shall not steal and covet and lie. We don't want that. We're right now, today, a Western civilization that's dominating the world and will decide what's true and what's not true. Don't tell me what's true and what's not true. We're going to decide what's true and what's not true. And that's what happens. And then, unfortunately, the next stage, and again, I hope I'm wrong about this, but it seems to repeat itself, the next stage after they come after the Jews is that empire falls. And I want nothing more than to be wrong, because I love the West. I grew up in the West. The West was great to my family when my grandparents came from Germany. But history does repeat itself. And if learning from history has taught us anything, is that we don't learn from history. So unfortunately, it's not headed in a good direction. But that's why they hate us, because we brought morality to the world. And I know that sounds like a controversial statement, as if I'm saying I'm better than anyone else. I'm not better than anyone else. My DNA is the same as anyone else's DNA. The difference, though, is that the Jewish heritage and tradition and culture focuses heavily on the family unit, on education, on things that today have become taboo in the West. And that is why we are here and all of those empires are gone. That is why not only are we here, but we're flourishing and thriving as a country. It's because we spent the last 80 years building an incredible country, and our enemies spent the last 80 years trying to destroy a country. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I've said that many times, that if your entire worldview, if your entire culture is built around who you hate,
That's right.
You're not going to have nice things. But if your entire culture is built around who you love, you are going to have nice things. And that's
right.
the difference between what we see happening with the Palestinians and with the Israelis. The Israelis are not fighting the Palestinians because they hate the Palestinians. They're fighting the Palestinians because they love the Israelis. They love their own people.
You could sum up the entire conflict by saying there's one side that wants to live in peace, and there's another side that doesn't want to let them live in peace, and that's it. That's the whole thing.
Yep, that is. Now, I've heard you say that truth is a virtue in much of your public narrative, and your work is about debunking the claims of genocide, apartheid, occupation. And as you said, your audience, many of them are actually not pro-Israeli. So how do you assess the effectiveness of your fact-based approach among people who are already anti-Israel?
It's a fantastic question. So first of all, I categorize the internet into three groups. There's our group, as in the pro-Israel group, who doesn't need convincing, but does need reinforcing, does need more information, does need knowledge. Then there's the opposite group, I call them the Heil Hitler folks. No talking to them. They're off the deep end. Then there's the middle group. Now, I don't have the data to back this up, but according to my, anecdotal evidence/experience, the middle group is by far the largest group, and that is the people who have integrity and are willing to learn and listen. They could be they could be anti-Israel, but they're willing to have a conversation. That's the group that I'm targeting, and I'm doing it in a very specific way. First of all, I'm not dictating to anyone and telling them they're an idiot if they believe ABC. I'm asking questions. So if you're going to come at me and say that, for example, October 7th happened because of the occupation, meaning the Israelis were occupying Gaza on October 6th. I'm not going to tell you that you're an idiot because there was not a single Jew in Gaza on October 6th. I'm going to ask you, what was the disengagement? Now, if you're the typical anti-Israel activist, you've never even heard that word before. You have no idea what the disengagement was. So I'm not going to tell you you're an idiot. I'm going to go, if you have integrity, go Google what the disengagement was. And if you have if you're a person with a brain and integrity, you're going to realize, oh my God, I never heard of this thing. I'm accusing them of occupying Gaza. They left Gaza in 2005. And if you're coming at me and you're saying that we're committing genocide, then I'm going to ask you, why are we sending in foot soldiers? Why are we sending in aid? Why are we doing any of the things? You think what Israel doesn't have the ability to flatten Gaza? You could do it in an afternoon. October 8th, this war would have been over if you wanted to commit genocide. We're starving Gazans? Really? Do you see how many trucks of humanitarian aid we're sending in? So again, I'm not dictating to anyone. I'm asking questions. But even more fundamentally, I've adopted something that is so uncommon today, and that is common sense. When I talk to people, I say to them, listen, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong and that you're an idiot and that the things that you're saying are simply factually false. Because again, if you believe something and I believe something else, that's where the conversation ends. There's nowhere to go from here. But if you say to me, globalize the intifada, and then you say, ceasefire now, I'm going to ask you to understand, or I'm going to ask you to explain to me what those two things are, because they are mutually exclusive and they cannot coexist. And if you're saying both those things, you are contradicting yourself. If you're saying that there's no food in Gaza and the hostages are being fed well, you're a moron, right? Because you're contradicting yourself, right? If you're saying from the river...
I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is something that I see over and over and over again with leftists all the time, not just with this issue, but with every issue. And I actually call it depravity, because in the Bible it says that if you've denied God, which is denied truth with a capital T, then you can believe anything. Your brain, God will give you over to a depraved mind to do things that ought not be done, and to see bad as good and good as evil, and that will affect everything in your life. And this is why you can have conversations with these people and boil it down to, so you're saying it's true that there is no truth, that you get to choose your truth and I get to choose my truth. They're like flavors of ice cream. And so there is no objective, overarching truth that exists no matter what your opinion is about it. And they'll say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And they don't even see the contradiction in that you're saying it's true that there is no truth. Yeah. And it's a self-defeating argument. But when people are depraved, they cannot see that. They literally are blinded from that. And I think that there's a very spiritual reason for it. Now, you yourself have been the subject of plenty of persecution since October 7th, as you've been speaking up. You were barred from Australia because they said you were being mean to Islamic people. What was your reaction to that, and what do you think that says about the state of free speech today and political correctness?
Yeah, so first of all, let me just address what you said before, because I could not agree more. But just to name one more example of the intrinsic paradoxes, right? Everyone loves to scream from the river to the sea, and then they say a two-state solution. Like, do you understand that from the river to the sea means erase Israel? Two-state solution means Israel exists. From the river to the sea means Israel doesn't exist. You can't say both those things, right? Just to kind of name one more thing. But, I think as it pertains to truth, I'm going to, if I may, get a little controversial right now, because it irks me beyond words. When you deal with again, we're going to get controversial, forgive me. When you deal with the gender issue, right? To be clear, like, if someone wants to be called, a dog, I'll call them a dog. You want to be called a man, I'll call them. I don't care. I'm not looking to offend anyone. But when you tell an entire generation that they're looking at a man and they see a man in front of them with their eyes, and you're telling them that's not a man, that's a woman. And they say, but I see a man. You're saying, no, that's a woman. What you're teaching them, in essence, is to not use critical thinking. Now, when it comes to pronouns, it doesn't really matter. What's the price? Call them a man. Who cares? The thing is that when you teach a generation not to use critical thinking, there's a very steep price. And the price is manifested when there's a war between good and evil, and you told your generation not to think. Now they can no longer differentiate between good and evil. So there's a very steep price. Yeah. And that's what we see in our generation. It's the post-truth world we live in.
Well said.
Anyway, so Australia, I was supposed to fly to Australia to speak at a fundraiser in an organization called Magen David Adom, which is basically the Red Cross.
Ambulances,
That's right. An emergency rescue organization that employs Jews and Arabs and is actually the perfect example of coexistence. And I was supposed to fly out on a Tuesday morning. Friday morning, I got an email from the Australian government saying, we have revoked your visa. I had to read the email like 5 times. They revoked my visa because of what they called Islamophobic and inflammatory tweets. And they included a document of examples of such tweets. None of those examples were in any way inflammatory or Islamophobic. For example, one of the tweets that they quoted was me saying that there was no massacre in the humanitarian zone in Gaza, something that the Washington Post and other media publications had just reported, and I said it wasn't true. And lo and behold, 24 hours later, all of those publications redacted that statement and apologized. So there was nothing wrong with what I tweeted. And I tweeted something else, which again, they took as Islamophobic, and I absolutely will push back on that. And I said as follows. I said, phobia, the word phobia has a definition. It's an irrational fear of something. That's what phobia means. Now, if we're talking about a religion that has, let's say, 1.8 to 2 billion members, out of which, and I'm being conservative when I say 10%, let's say 15. It's probably closer to 20, but let's say 15%. You know what? Sorry, let's go with 10. 10% of 1.8 billion people are radicalized. Again, that's according to the Pentagon data, and it's more like 20, but we'll go with 10. So that's 180 million people dedicated to the destruction of the West and to my death and to your death. Fearing that religion is anything but irrational. It is the most rational thing in the world. And when you hear a Christian say, praise the Lord, you know he's being thankful and thanking God. And when you hear a Jew say Baruch Hashem, thank God, you know he's thanking God. And when you hear a Muslim say, what do they say? Allah Akbar.
Aloha Snackbar.
Right? God is great. What do? You run for your life. So fearing such a religion is anything but irrational. And I wrote, of course, there are millions and millions of, happy, modern, peace-loving Muslims. But there are 180 million radicalized Muslims, and the rest of them are silent. So they're irrelevant because, as my friend Bridget Gabriel said, they only needed, 19 pilots or whatever the number was on 9/11 to bring down the towers. How many Germans? They weren't the majority that killed not 6 million Jews. How many Japanese? It was never the majority. The majority was silent. It was the minority that committed the atrocities. And so, fearing that religion is anything but irrational. And that's what I wrote. And that was, again, perceived as Islamophobic. I don't think it is. But in any case, they banned me. I immediately appealed the decision, via the normal official channels. I then emailed my friend, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who was a personal friend, and I'm an American citizen, and I applied for my visa on my American passport. So I reached out as an American citizen. I told him what had happened. I went to Israel's foreign minister. I went to Israel's former ambassador to the UN. I went to the Australian ambassador. I went all the way up the diplomatic channels, and then I went to the media, and it got hundreds of articles across mainstream media. And I thought at least one of those avenues would make them reverse the decision, but they did not reverse the decision. And I was banned for 3 years. I am banned for 3 years. And just when I thought it couldn't get more preposterous and more ridiculous, Tony Burke, the guy who decided to ban me, who's in charge of immigration in Australia, compared me in an interview to Kanye West, the guy who wrote a song called Heil Hitler. It's like, are you on, what are you smoking, right? And so now all these
smoking leftism is what he's smoking.
All these weeks later, now they've banned. 2 days ago, they banned another Israeli MK. They banned in the past. They banned Ayelet Shaked, an Israeli MK. Now they banned Simcha Ratman, an Israeli MK. And we were joking on WhatsApp. Me and Simcha Ratman. I showed him a collage I made of me, him, Ayelet Shaked, and Kanye. It's like in my life, I never, so you can't make this stuff up.
Unbelievable. So. I think one of the reasons, and this is something that I've talked about while I was in Israel last month, quite a bit, and that is, I get these questions like, why is there this group of conservative pundits who typically would have been very pro-Israel that have now come out and become very anti-Israel? Guys like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and people like that. And my answer to that, I want to see how you feel about this, but I'll tell you what my answer was when I was asked that question. And that is, during the sickness that happened in 2020 that shall not be named on YouTube or you'll get banned, we learned a lot about a lot of countries. And Americans, especially American conservatives, who were very strongly against the masking and the lockdowns and the all that garbage, and the jab and all that. We were looking at other countries to see how they reacted to that sickness. For example, my first overseas trip in 2020 was here to Armenia to cover the war, and you wouldn't have even known there was anything wrong in Armenia. Nobody wore masks. Everybody just walked around doing their thing, and it was like just normal. It was amazing. If you had asked me before that happened, how would Armenia, a former Soviet country, have responded to that? I would have said, it would have been very draconian. But what we saw was countries like Canada and Australia and the UK and even Israel with very draconian measures that really took no account of the just basic human rights of the freedom of travel and the freedom of association and the freedom to worship and things like that. They were so fear-driven that they just did things that were absolutely horrendous to their people. And so as Americans, we got a different view of these countries. I had no idea that Canada was a communist country until that happened. Australia was worse than Canada. And so now I look at countries like that in a different light. Well, some American pundits, I believe, saw what the response was in Israel, which Israel's a much more homogenous country in many ways. And so the Israelis just sort of all went together along with it, and they didn't have as much of a problem with the measures that were taken as Americans had with what measures were taken in Israel. But that being said, many Americans got to the point where what we hate most, American conservatives, is not even communism anymore. It's just leftism. And some American conservatives got the idea that Israel is led and driven by flaming leftists. And so therefore, ipso facto, I hate Israel. That kind of thing. How do you feel? How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I could tell you my theory, and that is, these guys, they make money from clicks, right? That's their business. That's their currency. Mm-hmm. And let's just say it as it is. Jew hatred sells today. It's the sexy thing to do. And, they have no loyalty to anyone. They have loyalty to clicks. So that's what they're doing. They're jumping on the bandwagon. I also believe that some of them, and just to be, so I'm not, legally held accountable for what I'm about to say, allegedly, I don't have any evidence to what I'm about to say, but I would bet a lot of money that some of them, maybe not all of them, but some of them are absolutely paid off by Qatar or other countries. Yes. I would bet money on that. But I mean, let's just take Piers Morgan as an example, because Piers Morgan, listen, Candace, as far as I'm concerned, is the manifestation of Hitler in our generation. She's just full blown.
She has so thrown the ball over the fence because she wasn't that way before.
Yeah, she's lost her mind. So I'm not even talking about her, or neither am I talking about Tucker Carlson, because he's sly and he tries to hide his anti-Semitism, but it's so transparent. Piers, he kind of played both sides, but the things that he says, you're an otherwise intelligent person. How are you literally quoting Hamas on a daily basis? Do you understand that you are quoting rapists and pedophiles? Like, how do you justify that to yourself? So in my opinion, he's an example of someone that realized, okay, well, when I trash Israel, I get way more traffic, so I'll just go with that. And that's what he's doing. And he's completely lost any sense of balance. I mean, it's not even close anymore what he does. And he invited me on his show, and I immediately said no. I was not gonna jump into his ambush where he doesn't let people talk. But then there's that Anna lady, that blonde Anna. I don't remember her last name. You know what I'm talking about? The crazy. I mean, these people, they've gone off the deep end. The way they hate Jews and the way they speak, and these blood libels. Like, I grew up listening and learning about the blood libels they told about Israel. Like, oh, we take Christian blood and we bake matzah with it, and we have horns. And I was like, really? Like, people believe this stuff? And here I am with these people who believe the craziest things. There's literally a video last week that Israel stole Iran's clouds. This is a true story. This is not a joke. A true story. An Iranian diplomat went on record saying that Israel stole their clouds, and that's why they have their water shortage right now.
Yeah, that's why there's a drought.
and people are quoting it. It's just like, when it comes to the Jews, somehow people lose their freaking minds. Like,
if that's not depravity, I don't know what is.
That's right. Really. That's right. I mean, I'll just give you one example from my previous life. In the tech world, there's a man named Paul Graham. Paul Graham is widely regarded as one of the, I'd say, five top tech investors in the world. He founded Y Combinator, where Airbnb was born, and he's a big deal. Mm-hmm. He, for years he played the I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm only anti-Zionist card. But anybody who saw his tweets, and anybody who realized that he blocked every single Jew on Twitter, including me, who I've never said a word to the guy in my life, we saw through it. But since October 7th, there's no mask. He's full-blown gone Hitler on us. I mean, full-blown. And you see these podcasters praising Hitler and saying it was the Jews' fault, like stuff that I genuinely cannot believe I'm seeing. But this is where we're at.
I never would have imagined in my whole life that I would have seen
these big platforms. They realize that they're becoming increasingly irrelevant. Their business model is becoming increasingly irrelevant, and so they have to revive their business. And the best way to do that is to hate on Jews. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, my viewership on this channel are largely American Christian conservatives who, wholeheartedly support Israel. But I wonder, what do you think that they misunderstand about the current landscape, or what could they do differently to amplify the message that you're trying to get out?
I mean, listen, here's, if I may just kind of be straightforward here. I did shut down a multi-million-dollar business on October 7th, and I don't have any, regrets at all. But if I may vent to you for a second, I'll say that, everyone, many of your viewers, and we love them for it, want to support Israel, want to support the Jewish people. And, sometimes they send money to this organization or that organization. And it's not, I'm talking about all pro-Israel people and sending money to Magen David Adom and amazing organizations. But as you know, one of, if not the most important front that Israel's fighting right now is the information war. And let's just say it as it is. Israel's not just losing, we're being obliterated. And yet, a frustration of mine, and again, I'm just being super kind of venting on you here, is that there are people, myself included, who have dedicated their lives to defending Israel online for the past 2 years. And when I say dedicate my life, I'm on it 20 hours a day, basically every day. And I'm also exposed to the worst of humanity. I'm on the edge of the worst of humanity. If you saw some of the messages that I got, you would get nauseous. And the truth is, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, because we're just as guilty as anyone else. But the reality is that no one is backing me. No one is facilitating the work that I'm doing. No one's enabling me to expand my operation, because I've reached 4 billion impressions with my 10 fingers. Now imagine if I had 300 fingers. Imagine if I had a team, if I had the world's top marketers on my team. I don't care if they're pro-Israel or not pro-Israel. Our enemies, if people think that our enemies, just coincidentally and spontaneously came up with all eyes on Rafah, then they're kidding themselves. This is a well-coordinated campaign. These guys have media kits. They have PDFs. They have instruction. They have WhatsApp groups telling people what to say and what not to say. We don't have that. And that's why we're losing. And so my goal here is to not only, get on the playing field, at least play the same sport, but actually to move the needle and potentially compete, because we have an amazing story. The problem is that I have this vehicle that's, flying along the highway, 4 billion impressions, but I'm running out of gas. And for some strange reason, and again, you'll forgive me for being whatever, for some strange reason, all of these amazing people, and I don't mean that sarcastically, amazing supporters of Israel are sending money to organizations that, let's just be honest, don't need more money. As we're sitting here, I just got a call this second from my son in Gaza, right? And I'll call him back, but he tells me, I talk to him, they have enough boots. They don't need more boots. They're good, So it's a little bit of a frustration of mine personally. So to answer your question, first and foremost, if someone is watching and they want to support Israel, and I'm not soliciting anyone. I hope that's not coming off. I don't mean to. I'm just saying.
No, but I asked.
Right. If someone wants to support Israel and they believe and they understand the importance of the information war, and they understand A, how important it is, and B, how far behind we're falling, we as in the people, the warriors, the people who are on the front lines of that war, we could use all the help we can get. So that's number one. But on a more practical level, in terms of what people can actually do, there's a common misconception about social media, and that is that people say, we've all heard it, people say, I only have 20 friends on Facebook. If I post, I'm just talking to my echo chamber, it's pointless, right? We've all heard people say that. That is just, technically speaking, just false. It's just not how social media works. Because if you have 20 friends on Facebook and you share something impactful, and one of those 20 friends shares it, you just exited your echo chamber and accessed their friends. And if one of their friends share it, you just actually did. So I can give you endless examples of, I'll give you one example. This is a great example, actually. You remember the famous plane crash on the Hudson all those years ago?
Yeah.
So there was that picture that we all saw, that picture of the plane on the Hudson. And we all know that picture, but nobody knows who took that picture. The guy who took that picture was part of the rescue team. He was an anonymous guy. He didn't have followers. He was nobody. But he took that picture, which was obviously a very dramatic picture, and he posted it. It got more views. Listen to this. This is wild. It got more views. It had 90 million views before CNN even knew there was a plane crash. Meaning, I'm talking seconds.
Wow.
Right? Why? Because he had a lot of followers? No, because the content was impactful. And so everyone, I don't care who they are, can use their Facebook and spread the truth. Just talk truth. We have too many people who are, just scared to speak truth or just don't believe in truth as a virtue. We do. And so we can't remain silent. It's our duty to speak up, because how do we come to the Islamic world and say, how come you're not speaking up? How come we're not speaking up? right? So every single one of us should use the platform that we have. And, you know, if you're not on social media, then use your platform to speak to your friends or your family members who believe that Israel's committing genocide. Do your part, speak up, don't remain silent. And, you know, sometimes that's accompanied with risk, professional risk and other things. And I understand that some people are scared to do that. And I'm not judging anyone for, you know, choosing their profession over, I get it. But I don't believe that this is a time in history that we can afford to remain quiet. I believe this is a time in history that we will look back upon, and our grandkids and great-grandkids will say to us, what did you do when the Jews were being massacred and were being harassed and were being, you know, persecuted again? What did you do? And I hope that none of us would want to look at our grandson in the eye and say, oh, I was afraid I was going to lose my job, so I remained silent. We can't afford to remain silent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I'm constantly telling my viewers, go hit that like button on this video, folks, and make a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, because those kinds of things are how we tell the algorithm on YouTube to show this video to people who have never seen our channel before and have it come up in their feeds. Because when there's a lot of engagement like that, then YouTube says, wow, people are really interested. They want to see more of this. So that it shows it, and that's how our channel grows. So you guys do have a platform. It's this platform. This is not just my platform. It's yours as well. And you can help get this word out by doing things like that. So, and I appreciate all of you who do. Now, for those of you who are just coming on, we've got Hillel Fuld on with us. If you remember last week, I did a podcast from Kazakhstan, I think, about the prediction that he made that we are likely to see a serious attack against Jews somewhere in the world, perhaps in the United States or Europe, in the next 30 days. And so I did a whole podcast about that. And I linked that podcast in the description of this one. So if you want to go back and watch that, you can. But I'm very grateful to have Hillel Fuld himself on with us to talk about it today. So another question here, given your background in startups and marketing, how do you see the role of Israel's innovation in shaping Israel's practical defense going forward? As you know, Israel at the beginning of the war was much more reliant on the United States and other countries for their materiel militarily, and now not so much. They're shifting to kind of doing it more at home. How do you see that AI, security tech, high tech innovation helping Israel's defense?
So first of all, it's important to mention this is yet another one of those blood libels that, you know, our enemies say, which is, you know, why is America sending Israel $3.5 billion of foreign aid? What is this? Why, you know? And I'm going to tell you that personally, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, told me that if anyone's on the receiving end of this relationship, it's not Israel, it's America.
That's right.
What Israel gives America is infinitely more significant than what America gives Israel, let alone the fact that that foreign aid can't just be spent on anything. It's spent buying American products. So that's
most of it is spent in the United States.
That's right. So that's an important point. But, you know, when it comes to defense tech, listen, I got to tell you, I'm a pretty, you know, I'm an observant Jew, but I'm a pretty down to earth kind of guy. I'm not a kumbaya kind of guy, and I'm not a supernatural kind of guy. I'm my feet on the ground. But if you know, if you're looking at the events of the last 2 years and you don't see God, then you don't want to see God. Like, I mean, we're talking, I'll give you a couple of examples, but we're talking, in my opinion, miracles at the caliber of the splitting of the sea. And I know that sounds like a dramatic statement, but I will back it up in a second. But the reality is that what we're seeing on the side of defense, both, by the way, using tech, but well beyond it. So I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. We're all familiar with the Iron Dome. We all heard about the Iron Dome. Great, fantastic. Let's just start first and foremost with the story of how that was invented. So I sat with Dr. Danny Gold, the inventor of the Iron Dome, and I asked him, Dr. Gold, how did you come up with this idea? Like, how did it go down? Tell me the story. So he told me that there were rockets raining down on Israel, and he brought the brightest minds in the country into a room. And he said, listen, we gotta solve this problem. And everyone came up with ideas, and he said, that's not good enough. I want to detonate the rockets midair. And they said, you want to what? He said, I want to detonate the rockets midair. And they said, you can't, that's impossible. What do you mean? A rocket's in the air for seconds. It's impossible. He said, well, that's what I want to do. He said, you can't, it's impossible. So he went to the Israeli military and they told him it's impossible. So he went to the Israeli government and they told him it's impossible. He went to the State Department. He went to the US military. He went to the world's leading military strategists and they all told him, sorry, Dr. Gold, what you're describing is science fiction. It's impossible. Here we have a system that detonates rockets at over 95% precision. People don't understand what this thing does. I mean, you have a rocket flying through the air and you're firing another rocket at it from the ground and hitting it out of the air. I mean, this is miraculous, miraculous stuff. But it's not just the Iron Dome, because Israel has 3 aerial defense systems. People don't realize this. This is wild. I mean, listen, it's going to blow your mind. We have 3 aerial defense systems, okay? We have the Iron Dome, which, again, technological wonder. We have the David Sling, which detonates missiles one step higher than the Iron Dome. And then we have the Arrow system. The Arrow system detonates ballistic missiles outside of Earth's atmosphere. I'm gonna let you think about that for 1 second. Again, think about what's happening right now, okay? You got a ballistic missile flying through the air, and you have a ground unit firing at the missile outside of Earth's atmosphere and detonating it, okay? Each one of these systems are literal miracles. But here's the thing. They were never built to work together. They were independent of each other. They were never built to work together. Those 2 nights when Iran attacked Israel, a year ago or whatever it was, not the 12-day war. I'm talking about Israel.
I was there actually. It was April 6th and then October 1st, I think.
What do you remember the numbers? What percent did we detonate?
88% was
99, my friend. 99.
99%.
99%.
88 was during the 12-day war, wasn't it?
Right. 99% precision. 3 systems, each a miracle in and of itself, that were never built to work together, and they work together to perfection. The people who built these systems will be the first to tell you in a million years they never expected it to work that well. So yes, you can explain, oh sure, these are tech systems, the same way you can explain that the splitting of the sea was the wind, right? These are miracles. But here's the thing. In last week's Torah portion, there's a verse that you're familiar with that God says, don't say that it's my might and my strength. Always remember that it's God. And I don't, we're guilty of that sometimes. Here I am talking about the Iron Dome and David Sling. Let's not forget something here. The missiles and the rockets and the drones that were not detonated by those systems fell in empty spaces. We hear this all the time. They fell in empty spaces. Listen, you've been here. This is a country the size of a fingernail. There are no empty spaces in Israel. It's just not a thing. Where are these things falling? These are unexplainable. They're open miracles that we're seeing on a daily basis. It is absolutely wild to see. So, there are many new funds that are building defense tech. There's a lot going on the defense side, but it's not the defense. It's not the $3.5 billion that America's sending Israel. It's God. It's God doing unbelievable miracles for us on a daily basis.
Amen. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's one thing that when I've spent, 7 months in Israel during the war so far. And when I'm there, I have an apartment in Jerusalem, and every morning at 9:00, our team gets together at the CBN studio right across the street from my apartment and has prayer time before we start our day. And one of the things that we pray every day is that Israelis would see God's hand in what's going on, that they would not be tempted to let hubris overtake them and say this was our power and our might. So thank you for saying that. That's an answer to my prayers. How does it make you feel to see these tens of thousands of Israeli leftists shutting down intersections across Israel and chanting at your government, trying to get the Israeli government to surrender to Hamas?
Well, there's a lot of different angles here. For starters, let's just start with the fact. Let's try to be a little positive here for 1 second and remind ourselves that those people who say that Israel's an apartheid state and all the other, we have hundreds of thousands of Israelis marching against the government in the streets of Tel Aviv. We have anti-Zionist Arabs in our parliament. It's just important to remember. That being said, many of these people are my friends. It's a lot of people from the tech world. Many of whom I have tremendous love and admiration for. And I know that it comes from a place of compassion. I know they want to see the hostages back. I know that, every time the protests, the topic and the subject changes, but a lot of them genuinely, I think, come from a place of love and compassion. Unfortunately, too many of them come from an obsession, the Netanyahu derangement syndrome, right? We're all familiar with Trump derangement syndrome, Netanyahu derangement syndrome, and these people, and this is not something I'm saying. I've literally heard them say, some, not all of them, some people say that this is something literally, you're not even gonna believe what I'm about to tell you right now, but this was in a TV interview with one of those activists who was asked if you could have all the hostages back or Netanyahu steps down, which one would you choose? Guess what he chose? Not the hostages, right? It's an obsession. It's a sickness. And we see that because the protests, again, they evolve, right? First it was this, then it was that, then it was, the judicial reform, then it was the deal that he's not going to sign. Then he signed the deal and it's not a good deal. And at all costs, it changes. And if you look at, even the legal, trouble, let's call it, that he's in, or the case against him, if you look at the things he's being accused of, you actually would not believe your eyes. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. You're going to think I'm kidding around, and you guys can go verify this. One of the accusations is that his wife accepted a Bugs Bunny doll as a gift. It's a true story. True story.
Really?
Yeah, true story.
I had not heard that one.
Yeah, accepted cigars. He accepted a Bugs Bunny doll. This is what we're talking about. This guy's fighting an existential war, leading the country better than any politician Israel's ever had, maybe the best politician of our generation, and they're bothering him with Bugs Bunny dolls. It's an obsession. They'll bring him down at all costs. And you know what? I have no problem saying the guy has been in office too long. He was prime minister on October 7th. He should take accountability. I'm fine with that. But suggest an alternative. They don't have an alternative. There is no alternative. So people speak of Naftali Bennett, who's a close friend. I speak to him on a daily basis. I love the guy, really. He's a brilliant dude. But if I'm being totally honest, I hope he doesn't hear this. He's a very talented politician, but he is the cheap knockoff of Netanyahu. He's the Alibaba version of Netanyahu, right? He's great, but he's not as good as Netanyahu. There's no one as good as Netanyahu. And I'm not saying he's perfect. To be clear, I didn't even vote for him. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's a strong leader. And he's withstood pressure that no other politician could withstand, like not going into Rafah, not going into Gaza City, not going into Lebanon. So, we need a strong leader. And so these people who stand on the streets, not only their obsession against Netanyahu, but you said before is spot on, which is they are literally empowering Hamas. Because what they're saying is take the deal at all costs, which means Hamas now has leverage, which is insanity. We're fighting an existential war. What are you giving the enemy a gift for? But this is where we're at. They'll do anything to bring down Netanyahu. It's absurd. It's absurd, and it's scary, and it's dangerous.
Well, so what we're seeing, I guess, is the same kind of division that we see in the United States, which is, I have to fight for my tribe, not for my country, but for my political party in my country. And every single thing that the other tribe does has to be not just wrong, but evil. It doesn't matter what they do. If they were saving baby seals, that would be evil. That would be terrible because they're on the other side. I cannot agree with anybody that I disagree with politically. And I have done quite a bit of talking about this on this show, that is not accidental. That is orchestrated. And there are entities and people, wealthy people, who are intentionally fomenting that division. And when I say entities, I mean entities like Iran and Russia and China that are specifically paying the people who orchestrate these protests. And we've even seen that in Israel, the people that are orchestrating, what is that? I forget the name of it. Blue and White Forever something. But some of these NGOs that have been orchestrating these protests, printing all the signs, getting all the money for all that, they're actually getting money from outside Israel, from other countries, some of it from the United States under Joe Biden. And that should be not only horrifying, but that's an act of war, is what it is. If you're sending agents provocateurs into our country to cause division and dissension and heartache and anger and that sort of thing, that is the informational equivalent of pumping fentanyl into our country to kill Americans.
100%.
And we should treat it the same way. We should be dropping warheads on foreheads to people who are doing just that. Now, that's my opinion. What do you feel about it?
Oh, I 100% agree with you. I think, by the way, to be clear, someone who might not be familiar with this might hear your words and think you're a conspiracy theorist. This is well documented. We have documents proving this, that money was sent from the Biden administration to Israel to undermine the Netanyahu government. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This is real stuff. And anybody who looks at the tents and the encampments on campuses, or where do they all come from? Where do all the signs come from? Where it just coincidentally, it's all orchestrated, all of it. And so it absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if you want to call it an act of war or act of treason. Either way, it is something that we should absolutely not tolerate. And actually, I do not believe that we've done enough, to raise awareness about this issue, because it's a very serious issue. So I agree with you 100%.
So let me get to something that is maybe a little uncomfortable for you, and that is my own criticisms. I 100% agree with you about the information battle space being the primary battle space now, because I've seen this evolve, especially since I've been covering wars for 23 years now, but especially since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, where the public perception about the war used to be a function of the news that was coming out about the kinetic battle space, what was happening on the battlefield. And so they would receive reports, and then that would affect public opinion. Now we're seeing it go the other direction. Public opinion is the primary battle space, and public perception can drive what actually happens on the battlefield. So whether or not Israel goes into Rafah, or whether or not they allow aid or don't allow aid, a lot of that is being driven by the mainstream media, false narratives, propaganda that's being put out by those guys to pressure Israel, levers of power that are being wielded by Hamas against Israel in the information battle space. As you said, Israel has been losing badly in that battle space, and you can definitely point the finger at the mainstream media, but I also point the finger at Israel because, for example, I'm a very experienced war correspondent. I've got literally more time in combat, both in my time in the military and as a journalist covering wars and disasters, than anybody in the IDF has in combat. Now, I wouldn't pretend that the combat I've seen is worse or that, whatever than the stuff they've seen in Gaza, but I'm just saying, just in terms of total time in combat, I've spent more time in combat than anybody in the IDF. That being said, and I'm pro-Israel. Christian Broadcasting Network has had a studio in Jerusalem for more than 30 years. We've been supporting Israel very strongly for that entire time. If anybody should be allowed to go into Gaza and embed with the IDF, it should be me. And I have tried and tried and tried and tried and tried every time I go to Israel, and the IDF just won't. They just won't let me in. Now, my last trip, just 2 weeks ago, I got a call and they said, "Hey, be in Gaza, be at the border crossing at Kerem Shalom tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon," something like that. And they let us in for 1 hour to see the aid LSA there, which was great. So I finally got into Gaza. But I've been pretty critical of the GPO for shooting themselves in the foot, because, as you say, truth is paramount. Truth is a virtue. And I realize that the IDF knows that they're going to get sandbagged by at least half of the journalists that they allow into Gaza, because they're just they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel. But I think that if you trust that truth will win in the end, by allowing more journalists into Gaza, you are going to get more truth out of Gaza. And as I believe, Israel is doing great work in Gaza and is working harder than any army has ever worked to avoid civilian casualties and that sort of thing in a very, very hostile environment, then they ought to be doing everything they can to shine a light on that, to counter that narrative. And in so doing, they could at least get closer to winning the information battle space. What's your thoughts?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I spoke to the foreign minister yesterday, and I spoke to his team today, and I basically said to them in not so many words, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, what are you actually doing? Like, you have budget. What are you doing? Because you're not activating me. So what are you doing? Listen, I don't want to throw them under the bus. They're doing work, but we're not playing the same sport. And I agree with you 100%. In fact, I don't want to make any promises, but we should talk about this offline. I'm sure I could connect you to the right people who will let you in. Like I said, I agree with you 100%. I think what you're saying is spot on. And I think we're not very good storytellers. Like, let's just say it as it is. In general, by the way, I made a whole career out of this.
I mean, they're working hard to put out lots of content that we can use, and that's the excuse I've been given. I mean, I've been invited in by the commanders of several IDF units, including a special operations unit. They sent me an invitation, and they said, pending the approval by the GPO, we would love to have you come in bed with our unit. And the GPO said, no, we're not going to do it.
And we'll work on that.
Yeah, I mean, but the IDF puts out tons of information, but it's coming from the IDF, and so it, by definition, because it's coming from one of the two belligerents, has to be discounted because they're only going to show you what they want you to see. And I'm not, look, I've been doing this job a long time. I know how to report on combat without telling bad people things they don't need to know, giving away operational security and all that. And I'm very happy if you dance with the one who brung you. So if I'm allowed into Gaza to embed with a unit, of course I have no problem with the IDF looking at all my footage and approving things before I put them out and stuff like that. That's all just par for the course. That's exactly what I do in Ukraine when I go there. It's what I do in Burma. It's what I do did in Afghanistan and Iraq and in Syria and everything. So it shouldn't be that big, that difficult. And what the sense that I have gotten has been less the sense of, well, we're just worried that we're going to get sandbagged, and more the sense of, we don't need you.
Oh, that's terrible.
And that is my problem. That has been really rubbed me the wrong way.
We're gonna fix that. That's terrible. That's terrible. That's really terrible. I apologize on behalf of. Honestly, it's terrible. But
well, thank you.
Again, if I'm gonna try to take my people from under the bus here for 1 second and say, you said it a few times also. I mean, there have been so many malicious journalists who have undermined Israel. And so, I would imagine that it's kind of like better safe than sorry kind of mentality. And I get that, but how hard is it to do due diligence on you and realize that you are not one of those people and that we should let you in because you're on our side? I mean, it's not the first, or Richard Kemp went in, and there's a couple of people that I'm sure that have gone in. So
sure, and they've let a lot of local Israeli journalists in there.
Right, we're going to work on that.
And Trey Yinks and guys like that. But anyway, so we've got a few questions from our viewers, and a lot of them have to do with, what do you think is Israel's end game when it comes to actually trying to get the hostages out? Now, I've talked about this quite a bit and said that Israel has to prioritize their war objectives. You can't say they're all equal. It doesn't work like that.
Because they're mutually exclusive.
Right. So if you have an objective of destroying Hamas, and you put, releasing the hostages above that, then you're not going to destroy Hamas.
Right.
If you put destroying Hamas at the top, you may not get your hostages back alive. What is Israel's plan there, do you think? I
mean, I can only speak on behalf of my opinion and what I do know, but this is, just to be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody formal or official. But you nailed it. I think it's so typical Israeli to come up with war objectives that contradict themselves, right? Because let's just be clear, like you said, right? If I'm negotiating with Hamas to get our hostages out, then I can't obliterate Hamas. If I'm obliterating Hamas, I can't get our hostages out, right? It's like you can't make this stuff up. They're literally mutually, you can't coexist. But the reality is that I don't really see a scenario in which we go into Gaza City, take over, destroy Hamas completely, and get our hostages back. I don't see that happening, with one exception, and that is God. And that this is a situation where I literally bang my head against the wall every day thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this? And I just remind myself that I defer to God on this. He's done crazier things, right? He's done more amazing things than this. That's what he's going to do. I don't know how, I don't know where. We've had miracles. This is going to be another miracle. I cannot, from a military strategy perspective, cannot think of a scenario in which we can both beat Hamas and get our hostages back.
Well, as we say, from your mouth to God's ear on that. So we are just at an hour, and that's it for our show today. But I'm very, very grateful that you take some time to come on with us today, and I know that the viewers are as well. A lot of great comments in the chat. Just people are loving this interview. So I'd love to keep your number, and hope you'll consider me a friend if there's anything I can do for you.
What do you mean consider you a friend? You're the epitome of a friend. What are you talking about?
Well, thank you. And so where can people find you, and how can people support you if they'd like to do so?
So social media, any platform you want, I'm very active. I respond, or I try to respond to all messages. So if somebody sends me a message, and I will respond. And if I don't, then ping me again. I might have missed it. But you can reach me there, and you can share my email with your audience if you want. And I do, again, sorry for whatever. I do have a nonprofit. If anybody does want to support, I do have for-profit platforms where you can support my work. There's different ways to do it if somebody does want to support, but if anybody wants to reach out with a question or have a conversation, jump on a Zoom, always happy to do that. So, you can email me or you can shoot me a message on social media.
Great. And that's exactly what I did, and you got right back to me. So I appreciate that willingness to I know I get hundreds and hundreds of messages every day from the internet, and I know how challenging it can be to actually pay attention to all of them. So I do appreciate you for doing that. All right. Well, Hillel Fuld, thank you so much for being on with us. And again, we'll hope to get you on again soon.
Anytime,
my friend. Let's all hope and pray that you are wrong about your predictions, but I think we should prepare and pray as if you are not. So, folks, thank you so much. And we will see you again on the next one. And take care. Thanks for watching.